On tonight's episode of Cooking with Crime, we'll be discussing Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. Richard was born on February 29th, 1960 in El Paso, Texas. He was the youngest of 5 children. His dad was a police officer who was also an alcoholic who abused his whole family regularly. Richard suffered from 2 head traumas. One when he was 2 years old, a dresser fell on top of him, and the second one was when he was 5 and got hit by a kid on a swing. During his early teen years, he'd sleep in a cemetery to stay away from his abusive father. Now, Richard's cousin Miguel is really the first person in his life to fuse sex and violence together. Miguel was a Green Beret in Vietnam, and when Richard was 12, he would show him pictures of him decapitating people and raping women. The pictures aroused Richard, and that's when he started having violent fantasies. His uncle also taught him military tactics in which he would later use in his killings. Richard eventually moved in with his sister and brother-in-law, and his brother-in-law was a peeping Tom and taught Richard how to be a professional peeping Tom. He was also a drug addict and introduced Richard to drugs at the age of 13. Oh, also, when he was 12, his uncle shot his wife in the face right in front of him and only served 4 years. So now he also thinks he could get away with anything. I mean, this uncle only served 4 years for shooting a woman in the face. When he was 15, he worked at the Holiday Inn. He stole a key card, broke into a room, and attempted to rape a woman. But her husband was there and beat him to a pulp. They were from out of town, so they didn't want to deal with it, so they didn't press charges. Again, that mentality of, I could get away with anything comes back. So now Richard is living in Skid Row in LA and is homeless. He had horrible hygiene, he eats like shit, and he never brushes his teeth. His victims would later describe him as smelling of wet leather. He had a horrible addiction to coke and would dissolve it in water and shoot it up. And that's when he started getting into Satanism and tattooed the devil star on his stomach and palm. In 1984, he stabbed and raped an elderly lady. He stabbed her so deep he almost decapitated her. In 1985, he started abducting, raping, and molesting little girls. Later in an interview, he would say that it made him feel godlike, choosing who lives or who dies. Ramirez would kill 16 people in 14 months. He'd use thumb cuffs his uncle gave him. Thumb cuffs are an alternative, a smaller alternative to your traditional cuff. Ramirez has to be the scariest serial killer, in my opinion, because he'd break into the safety of your own home while you were sleeping and attack you. He'd always take the man out first as fast as possible, then have his way with a woman. He'd torture, rape, and sodomize his victims. The victims he left alive would say, he would always say, "Shut up, bitch, or I'll kill you." So much, in fact, that they had a lineup of suspects say, "Shut up, bitch, or I'll kill you," for the survivors to identify. When he'd torture his victims, he'd rip their cord out of a lamp and shock them. He would mutilate and gouge the eyes out of his victims. He even stomped a victim to death. He'd tell his victims to swear to Satan before killing them. He hacked some of his victims up with a machete. He'd even eat a snack, then burglarize you before leaving. He has no pattern. He's so scary. And when he was done killing for the night, he'd just go back to the Cecil Hotel, strip down in the alley, throw his bloody clothes at the dumpster, and walk half naked back to his room. Police started thinking it was multiple killers due to the vast amount of crime. The composite drawing looked nothing like Ramirez. They gave him gray hair and bulging eyes. He would always steal cars, so he was always in a different vehicle, which made it even harder for police to find him. He was also extremely meticulous about wiping off his fingerprints. The police finally pinpointed the killings to one person when they started noticing a single Avia brand footprint size 11 at every scene. When they named him the Night Stalker, he would start telling his victims he left alive to tell them the Night Stalker was here. His last victim would get a partial plate and he would call the police. He was pulled over. The police officer asks him to get out of the car. And the police officer actually asks Richard, "You're not the guy going around killing people, are you?" He says, "No, man, you haven't caught that guy yet?" The officer goes back to his vehicle and Ramirez draws a devil star on the hood of the car and takes off. The police checked the car for prints and found a single print on the rear view mirror. Bam! It's a match. Richard Ramirez. So on August 30th, he went to Tucson, Arizona to visit his brother and has absolutely no idea his mug has been plastered all over LA. His brother wasn't home, so he decides to go back to LA on August 31st. Ramirez was standing in a gas station looking at a magazine when he sees his mugshot. He looks up and sees 2 elderly ladies were looking at the exact same magazine. They look at Ramirez and they yell, El Matador, which is the killer in Spanish. Ramirez dips and runs 4 miles through LA, dodging bushes, jumping fences, running through backyards. He reaches Hubbard Street and sees a couple in a car, attempts to steal the car. The owner of the car's boyfriend gets out and starts beating him with the steel pipe. Ramirez runs across the street and tries to steal another car from a 55-year-old lady. Here's the keys, but steel pipe guy, he catches up to him again and starts beating him upside the head again with the pipe. Ramirez gets up, takes off. Now the whole town is chasing him through the streets of LA. Steel pipe guy, he catches up to him again and starts beating him again. He falls to the ground. The whole town, he catches up to him and they start kicking and punching him. And the police arrive and Ramirez says, "Thank God you guys came." Ramirez was finally arrested. On September 20th, 1989, Ramirez was convicted of all 43 charges, 13 counts of murder, 11 sexual assaults, 14 burglaries, and he was sentenced to death in California's death chambers. He would serve 23 years on death row before dying of blood cancer at the age of 53.